Celia.
I have just curious about that. I got a pop-up here which says the content of this meeting is being sent to a third party by
That's
staying.
the live streaming, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is Rich logged in.
And he can give you a detailed explanation of that third party YouTube.
Okay.
And here's Peter. Hi, Peter. Ah, Shoria is here with us. Hello. Hello, Shoria.
Hello. Hi, how are you?
Hello. Good. Am I saying your name properly?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
How do you pronounce yours?
Hetty.
Hetty. Okay. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you for coming.
We have the advantage of knowing how to pronounce your name from the movies.
Me?
Yeah, you. There aren't too many Headies around. You and
There are not too many. And here's a quick funny story while we're giving it a minute to see if any of other directors are joining us. I was told from the time I was a child and wondering about these things that I was named for my father's aunt, whose name was Hetty. Hello, Celia. And in, I guess, the 2000s, whenever it was that Hetty Lamar died, my mother, who was living in Florida at the time, took it upon herself to clip out Hetty Lamar's obituary from the New York Times and mail it to me, even though she knew I got the Times at my doorstep every day at that time, with a little note that said, "I thought you would want to learn some more about your namesake." I got her on the phone and I said, "Mom, thought I was named for Dad's aunt. What's this about Hetty Lamar?" Oh, I had heard of it. I knew who she was. And she said, "Well," my mother was very severe. "I never would have agreed to that except for Hetty Lamar." And then I learned more about Hetty Lamar, and okay, I'm fine with that. All right, so we now have 4, 5, 6 of our board of directors. We are missing 3. So we have 2/3 of us. So I think we should proceed. I have the agenda in front of me. Let's kick off with the consent calendar. You've all had, well, I've sent, whether you've had time to see them and read them, Celia's minutes from the last meeting, as well as the treasurer's report and the BAIT report, which I only forwarded this afternoon. Does anybody have anything they would like to say about any of those documents? I'm looking for hands. Okay, I will take that as no changes to any of those documents. Celia, I read through the minutes of the last meeting more carefully than I sometimes do, and I really would like to commend you for such a job well done.
Yes.
They're very thoughtful and very complete and very sensitive and tactful, and well done.
Thanks.
Thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
All right, and here comes Kamal. Hello, Kamal. All right, so I would like to move that the 3 consent calendar items be accepted as distributed. Would somebody like to second that motion?
Second.
Any votes opposed? Kamal and Rich, I don't have you on video, so if you want to oppose, you have to do something like stick a hand up or unmute or,
I'll actually abstain because I wasn't at the last meeting.
okay. Have you had a chance to read the minutes that were circulated?
I have not.
Okay.
I've been
So you're-
busy.
So we've got Rich abstaining. Hi, Kamal, now I can see you. Um, okay. So consent calendar is approved. Moving on, next item in old business is the caroling recap. That's me. It took place on December 21st, which was a Thursday. We had really good weather, I would say. It wasn't raining, it wasn't snowing, which is kind of a pity because it's always nice when it's snowing. It wasn't terribly cold, it wasn't terribly windy. You know, it just was pleasant and seasonal, and we had a nice big crowd. I counted something like 75 people at the peak. Nobody gave us any cookies this year, which was too bad. Roberta did a beautiful job on the new songbooks and best printed the copies for us, and then I used my resources available to give them, it's called a comb binding, which has the advantage of being able to be removed and reused if we wanted to add a page, lose a page, change the cover, whatever. Anthony, who runs the caroling, and Roberta, who did the songbooks, both received a little token of our appreciation for their efforts. I had seen online a set of coasters that had misheard Christmas Carol lyrics that I thought were kind of hilarious. Fun fact of the evening, there's a name for misheard lyrics. They are called mondegreens. You can look it up in Wikipedia if you like to find out why they're called mondegreens, but that is what they're called. So these were mondegreen coasters specific to carols, and they each received a set of those. I think it was a very successful evening. Was anybody who's with us tonight there? Peter, you were there briefly with your camera. Oh, that's something I should talk about. Peter was taking lots of pictures and made a nice video, which he has circulated. Peter, did you circulate that to everybody, or was that just a short
No,
list?
I was going to leave that to you, Hetty, and
Okay.
feel free to post it on the website if you want to do that as an inclusion to the upcoming article. It was a really lovely event.
Okay, just thank you. Just before the event, we were contacted by a guy who does something called the Bar Crawl Radio. It's a podcast. And
Right,
he was interested.
you've written about that on your newsletter, and he had some. Yeah, he did a lovely.
He's a contributor to the Talented Neighbors column, I believe.
Right.
So he expressed interest in it and asked permission to come along and record some of it, and showed up, and he did a quick interview with Anthony. and has since released a podcast that wasn't exclusively about our event, but it was coupled with a couple of other seasonal events, and he was drawing some overarching conclusions about them. So yeah, that's a good idea, Peter. I haven't circulated them to anybody off of, I think you texted it to me, but I will endeavor to do so because it shouldn't just die in my inbox. In short, a lovely evening, a good time had by all. If anybody has anything else they would like to add to this topic.
We sang "Rocking Around the Christmas Tree." And
Have a happy holiday. It really was. I always grouse about not needing one more thing to organize when it comes holiday season. I usually host Thanksgiving. Our family celebrates both Hanukkah and Christmas. So it's just from the middle of November through the end of the year, a bonanza of things to do. And then every year when I arrive at the event and I watch the people and I look at the people coming in the windows and, standing in their doorways, I am renewed and refreshed, and I'm very glad that we continue to do it. Dorothy O'Hanlon was a special guest this year. She's not able to carol with us, but she was waiting for us at the door of the Broadmoor. She's a former member of our board of directors, for those who don't know her. She has managed a variety of medical issues over the last some years. And there she was, and seemed very happy to see us, and I was very happy to see her. Celia, were there any other lyrics you'd like to sing for us? Okay, so moving on. Our next old business topic, spring fundraiser. I'd like to introduce Shaurya Gar. Wave, Shaurya, so everybody knows it's you in your little box. Shaurya has volunteered to host the event, to coordinate all the moving parts of it. I have equipped her with Bob's extensive notes from prior years being the coordinator, and made Shaurya aware that the one really pressing item is to come up with a date so we can apply for a permit for it, because that has a long lead time. I think it's 3 months, so it needs to happen soon. Shaurya, is there anything you would like to find out from any of us this evening?
Yeah, I was wondering in the past around what months have we found the date most suitable for, if you guys had any input regarding the date so that we can move forward.
Historically, we've aimed for the weekend that usually falls in between Mother's Day and Memorial Day. But because you're running the show, the date needs to be something that works for you. So if for some reason that date doesn't work for you, figure out something else. We don't want to double up with Mother's Day or Memorial Day because most people are out of town. Doing it much earlier than that, the weather's a little iffy.
Yeah.
Doing it after the end of the school year, also iffy because a lot of people flee. So, your window is mid-May to mid-June.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think I'll try to stick right, maybe like first week of June or the second week of June.
Okay, so figure out which date you would like. You can email me. I can circulate it to the board.
Yes.
To confirm it. But as I said, the one priority at the moment is to get that permit submitted.
Yeah. And I had one more question regarding having the vendors. Do they each need to fill out some sort of documentation to be there? And do I have to do in something or how to go about distributing that to them?
You may find information about that in Bob's notes. There is a woman who has volunteered to be the vendor coordinator. She's in that email I sent you. I believe her name is Lynn Elliott. Amy recently confirmed with her that she is willing.
Okay.
So step one would be to access the list of vendors from previous years,
Okay.
which
Okay.
somebody has.
I have that list. I think you
Oh, you do?
sent that. Yeah, you did send that list.
Okay, so Lynn could take care of emailing all of those.
Okay.
The other thing that will happen is that I'll be sending out a list of articles for the next newsletter, which will be distributed in the beginning of March. We'll
Okay.
publicize it there.
Okay.
We have an email list, so you can write up a short message
Sure.
and it can get sent out to our email list.
Great. Sounds
And I don't know, you could check with Lynn, or maybe you want to tap one of the other volunteers on the list to be, let's call it publicity coordinator.
Mhm.
And that person could announce the event for vendors specifically
Okay.
via Craigslist or next, what's it called, Nextdoor.
Yeah.
Through BAIP, we sometimes circulate information.
Okay.
Through the West 104th Street Block Association, we can circulate information. And initially, all that publicity is targeted for bringing vendors in.
Yes.
A little bit later, we do another blitz that's
Mhm.
more to publicize the event and encourage the traffic, people walking by and letting people know of the different features of the event.
Okay. All right. And what is the way that vendors confirm or deny their participation in the event? So how do they let us know?
There is a vendor form.
Mhm.
I think the last one we used is still at the website.
Okay.
It will need to be updated. I don't know if the website version is a PDF. Go ahead, Bob. I see your hand up. Unmute.
Yes, there has always been a fee. And
Okay.
so they're not considered signed up until they've actually paid the fee.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
a way of controlling.
Who comes on and who doesn't? Okay. All right. Thank you.
And you can discuss all of that with Lynn,
All
who'll
right.
be coordinating that. And then
Okay.
at some point, Lynn will have to pass the checks along to Gary,
Mhm.
who takes care of making our bank deposits. But Lynn should receive them first to record them, or Gary, if you pick them up from the PO box, you'll have to let Lynn know that you've received them. We'll need some mechanism for
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
that communication to happen.
Okay. And do we need to help the vendors set up, or will they be okay? All right.
That's their responsibility. They bring their own tables and chairs. What
Okay.
we do, and this is a somewhat time-consuming thing that happens just before the event, usually the day before, weather permitting, is that the spaces for the vendors get chalked off on the street.
Okay.
And each vendor is assigned a number in advance. So when they come to the block, they look for their number in
Okay.
their space and they just unpack and set up.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Those were all my questions. Thank you.
Okay. As you think of more things, send them along because we want to help make this an easy job for you.
I will. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just add one thing, Hetty? Lynn did volunteer to do the vendors, but she's never done it before. So she may need some help figuring out or being told what the process is.
Okay. Before Bob was coordinator of the event, Anthony Betlov was the first vendor coordinator. And I'm sure that he's not going to be vendor coordinator, but I'm sure that he would share his expertise with Lynn as needed. Okay. Sharia, I am going to write an email to Anthony and I will CC you about supporting the vendor
Sure.
situation. Because once the permit is applied for, that is the next part because of the income that the vendor fees generate. Okay. Is there anything else we need to discuss having to do with the spring fundraiser?
Thank you, Sharia, for taking this on. And feel free to ask any of us if you have any questions, need help. we'll pitch in, okay?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks, Eddie, for clarifying everything.
Happy to do it. Okay, moving along. Next item is annual meeting update. I emailed Sean Abreu, is that how we say his name? His office, and got an answer so fast. He would love to come and speak to us. I said, terrific. And I asked, are there any particular dates that we should avoid or shouldn't avoid? And they were very flexible. And the answer was, there it is. Nope, that's not it. Good. That generally speaking, Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays are better days for meetings for him. So I think we should choose a date for our annual meeting, and we'll let his office know so we can lock him in. Traditionally, we've had the meeting usually late March, mid-April. If we aim for Tuesday, April 16th, we have the benefit of having our April meeting on the 9th, and then we can have the annual meeting on the 16th, which gives us one more opportunity to take care of our planning and administrative stuff. Does anybody have anything they would like to contribute to a discussion of what should be the date of our annual meeting?
I think that sounds reasonable, mid-April.
Sounds good to me.
I'm fine with it. It's the day after tax day, so.
Yes.
I'm just checking the school calendar.
Public school doesn't close till later. I don't know about private schools.
So, I'm sorry, what day did we say? April?
I was proposing the April 16th,
That's a Tuesday. Yeah, it should work.
Tuesday. Public school is closed the following week and some of them went after that, but not that week. And it's after Eid. So if we're in favor of that, I will let his office know that that's our target. It still gives us time to discuss whether we want to add any additional speakers on additional topics, and we talked about that last month. Are
we imagining this is going to be a online meeting or an in-person meeting?
That's what I was just pausing to think about how to discuss and whether to discuss. When we've done it in person, we have met mainly in the Marseille community room. There was once that we met in the theater in 310 Riverside, but that was a really long time ago. Other than that, I'm not aware of a public space that would be available to us. Does anybody else have ideas for venues where we could meet in person if we chose to?
How big is the Marseille meeting room? How many people can fit in there?
A lot.
40 or so, 40
I
to
was going to
50.
say 50 to 60
Yeah.
if we use all the way back.
So is there any reason not to try to use that one again?
I can't think of any except that I have no clue who's running things over there. Peter, do you know?
Yes, yeah. Anna Pumaral is the manager, and she's very accommodating.
So do you think it would be better for you to ask her whether she'd be
Sure,
willing to
I'd be
host us,
happy
or
to.
should I do
I'd be
that?
happy to ask her if it would be available, and to copy you, of course. Sure, that's no problem.
Terrific. Thank you,
Also,
Peter.
a question about, would we want to make it hybrid so people who want to attend on Zoom can? And if
Sure,
we
I think,
do
yeah.
they have the capacity to do that there?
well, that's a good. So technically, yes, they have a big television screen and internet and all of that. It has been problematic recently, I can tell you from personal experience. But I think by April, hopefully, it'll be, it's definitely something I can ask her. But they do have a big screen in the community room for that kind of thing. You can plug a computer in and all of that good stuff. And they have internet and all of
My
that.
concern is the robustness of the internet signal, just because the Zooming does chew up a lot of bandwidth. And if we're going to live stream it as well as Zoom it, it's a lot.
Yeah. It's a concern. We could find out about that.
Okay.
And also, when you spoke to Sean Abreu's office, did you specify that it might be in person? Okay.
I in fact mentioned that it might be in person, it might just be Zoom, it might be a hybrid of both. So they
Okay.
are aware.
Great.
He loves to come to either way, so I'm sure it'd be fine.
All right, so we have the beginning of our plan. I'm reminding you all that effective then, I will no longer be acting chair, and that somebody needs to be ready to raise his or her or their hands to take on the role. So it's time to give that serious thought. Does anyone want to add any comments about whether we limit the meeting just to Sean, or do we add additional topics for discussion? There's been talk of rats, there's been talk of transportation.
Well, I think I was persuaded by the last discussion we had that we should do a separate event centered on the kind of transportation issues that our area is going to face over the next while. And that I think that doesn't easily double up with Sean. I mean, we want to hear what he has to say, and not have people coming for the other piece of it.
What was the specific ask of Sean? And could we open it up to a block resident Q&A with Sean?
I believe so. I wasn't specific about what we wanted him to speak to, just that it was our annual meeting and that we'd like to introduce him to the residents and give them the opportunity to get to know him, and him to get the opportunity to start building a relationship with us as we enjoyed for so many years with Gail.
I would not schedule anything else. I think it's a really important topic. We acquired him as an elected official with no vote. So I think it's really important that we get to meet him and give residents the opportunity to just talk with him and ask whatever's on their mind. So I think any other topic would just distract from that great opportunity.
And I think leaving ample time for a Q&A is appropriate. The other advantage of leaving the transportation issues as a topic for another meeting is that we get to host another meeting, and that's a good thing for us to do.
Yeah.
And I would support what Richard just said. I think Sean, as the new kid on the block, is looking for opportunities like this, and
Obviously.
wants to meet people. So I think he'll make the time.
Oh yeah, he was quick to
Yeah.
accept the invitation. Okay. Any other annual meeting related comments, suggestions?
Just one other thought is separate from this meeting, but in this similar vein is Danny O'Donnell is not running again. So there's a new race for first the primary and then the general election to replace him. We might want to do a similar type of event for block issues for any of the candidates running. I don't know if any candidates have declared on the Republican side. I know there are 4 candidates who declared on the, or who at least expressed interest on the Democratic side.
Thanks for mentioning that, Rich. I was unaware of that. Do you know why he's not running again?
I don't know if he directly said. I believe that commuting to Albany is a commendable exercise for any public citizen, and I think the patients might run out for doing that on a long-term basis. I
I
don't
ran
know.
into him in the West 80s, and he seemed a little depleted for him physically, and I wondered if there was any discussion of illness or.
Not that I've heard.
Okay.
I hope not, but not that I've heard.
Yeah, it seemed more mobility than illness, but he didn't have his usual stamina and verve that day anyway. It was just before Thanksgiving. Okay, thanks for mentioning that. As more information about that becomes available, keep us posted, Rich. That election will take place in November.
I believe so. But is it 24 or 25?
This year is 2024. As
I
of
know what year
January
we're
1,
in.
a
I'm
few days
wondering
ago.
when the election is.
I have a computer here. I
It's
can
this
look
year.
it up.
It is this year.
You know,
Okay.
I'm sorry for jumping in. I was just going to say, as an issue, I think there's a lot of community interest in the new ways in which trash is being handled with containerization and all of that, and composting will be more of a requirement coming in September, and there are already certain requirements for containerization and composting that are going into effect around the neighborhood. And there's also, a lot of discussion about street sweeping and alternate side of the street parking and compliance, and there's just a lot of concern about cleanliness of the streets, and I think it would be that is something that a lot of people in the neighborhood are concerned about and would like to have more information and input and activity around that subject.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because I received an email earlier this week from a resident of 103rd between Riverside and West End, expressing a lot of concern about the cleanliness of the street and the inability of the street sweepers to get through because of the parked cars that don't move. And she was wondering whether there was anything we could do to help that. Amy, I wondered, is that a topic you can bring up at the cabinet meeting?
I actually did bring it up last time because Peter had sent me an email about the cars not moving and all of that stuff. And they unfortunately were, I mean, what they said is they're gonna be, or maybe they already have, they were gonna raise the fines,
The ticket.
which to me, I mean, there should be a meter person out there ticketing people right there when it happens. Doesn't seem like that's what's happening. That used to happen, but they weren't that helpful. I did bring it up. I can bring it up again.
Yeah, the letter I received was urging towing, even if it was just like a one-time thing, to make people realize yeah, this is a serious thing. I included in our last newsletter, move your cars. I don't know whether people who are disinclined to do that are going to be persuaded by my having included it in the newsletter. But if we can do something if we as a group can do something to help that, I think it would certainly fall within our purview, whether through the cabinet or perhaps Sean can help us with this, or perhaps the community board, independent of the cabinet, or, somehow, some way, let's see if we can do something, and maybe making that a dedicated topic of a meeting sometime, and having Department of Sanitation. And who does the ticketing? That's Department of Transport.
Now that's the police department. And, it used to be, there used to be this statistic that there were $500 million worth of parking tickets issued every year, and that it was a major source of revenue for the city, and people who didn't like that just considered it harassment. But I think I have the same impression that there seems to be less ticketing now, and it is kind of amazing just to see a street sweeper go right down the middle of the street, because so many people do not move their cars, and those that stay in their cars don't seem to be ticketed when there are tickets. So I don't really know what's going on, but I think having somebody from the sanitation department talk about this. I know that there's also some legislation about having the cameras on the street sweepers do automatic issuing of fines to people who don't move. That may be a state legislator thing. It's complicated. At any rate, it would be good to get more information about this, because I think everybody wants to have the street cleaned, and the only way to do that is if we get into sort of the pre-COVID pandemic. People used to double park and sit in their cars until the street was cleaned, and that, for some reason or other, that doesn't seem to be happening so much anymore. It's an issue.
I parked my car on the street for so many years, and I wrote my master's thesis during alternate side parking, sitting in the car. And the idea that you just wouldn't move it, it's unfathomable, because you always would get a ticket. And I guess with the cutbacks in city budgets and such, that's one of the areas that has fallen by the wayside. Peter, I'm wondering if you would do a very brief synthesis of some of the issues that complicate solving this problem for the next newsletter. Just what you just said to us about cameras and those things that are already in the discussion.
I don't know if I could do it for the next newsletter, or if I know enough about all of the issues. But I think it's a topic. It's definitely worth discussion. Let me think about it. I don't want to give you a commitment.
Okay, it doesn't have to be paragraphs and bullet points would get it done.
It clearly, and it's a complicated issue too. There are also a lot of people, Gary has raised this with out-of-state license plates that are parking. I don't know how that impacts any of this, but we all know that the streets are a lot dirtier, and that there's a lot less street sweeping, and that it started when they reduced alternate side of the street parking during the pandemic, first from 2 days to 1 day, and now it's back to 2 days, but people's behavior has clearly changed. So I don't know what to attribute that to, but it's obvious. The results are obvious by the complaints that you hear, including from this letter writer. Is that for the newsletter, Hetty, or was this?
No, it was just directed to us as the Block Association. Please, can we help with this?
Okay, maybe if you could circulate it to to
Sure.
us. Thanks.
So at risk of going down multiple awful rabbit holes, do we want to consider passing what would ultimately be a somewhat meaningless, but it could get a ball rolling resolution about parking? And I think we'd want to avoid some of the more contentious questions, but if we might just see what areas there are where there's consensus. And one issue which I think there might be consensus is just this concern that when people are not moving their cars, the streets are not getting cleaned. And saying, it's really important that people aren't moving their cars, that they at least get a ticket for not moving their car. And perhaps that the ticket price needs to be raised, because if at $60, it's still a lot cheaper to just leave your car than to get a private lot. So I think people are intentionally leaving their cars because there's the slap on the wrist isn't significant enough to get them to move. That could be one topic. Another could be if there's consensus, I don't know if there would be, urging the state elected officials to consider residential parking permits, especially with congestion pricing coming. That could be something that, if there is consensus, we might want to put our voice out there, just saying, this is something that should be considered. I think, there's great risk that we start getting into issues that are not there, where there's not consensus, just because parking is such a charged issue, and I think we should probably avoid them. And if we just say, there's not consensus on this issue, okay, fine, move on to the next.
I'm going to add that to the agenda for our next meeting as a topic that we will discuss a little more deeply, Rich, but I want to keep us moving along
Okay, can I
tonight.
just say one last thing, which is, and it's a little off our turf, but it's a lot of our neighbors, on Riverside Drive, the area from 97 to 104th is at the end of the street sweeper route. They never get to it, so it never gets cleaned. I'd love to see them split the route in half, change the regulations that you only sweep 1 day a week. You only have to move your car 1 day a week, but actually clean the street on that day. If you look at the east side of the street, there are leaves that have been there for months. It has not been cleaned for months.
I think that's certainly something we can put some pressure on the Department of Sanitation to deal with, even in the absence of any kind of new resolution or changing of the regulations, because they're supposed to be doing that.
Yeah, and I've been in touch with the supervisor, who's great, a real nice guy. And he just says the route's too long. And so he's at times gotten them to do it the back half first.
Yeah.
But okay.
Do something. If you want to supply his number or his email to me, I can write him on behalf of the Block Association.
I don't know if it's needed, because he doesn't have anything in his power. He's great and he's been doing. Anything beyond that, he doesn't. So I think it's better if we do and also I'd want to make sure that the Block Association is all in agreement before we have a letter coming out from the Block Association.
I can also bring that up with the that's exactly the kind of thing they're supposed to address. A city service that's not being fully offered. So I can bring that up. We have a meeting next week.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'd love to see it just change the regulation, do it once a week, but actually do it once a week.
Yeah, it needs to be done. Okay, moving along. I am moving things around a little bit. Just to tidy up some stuff. On the topic of meeting in person, which we just touched on, having to do with the annual meeting, I've been in touch with Ray Dooley, and he's the man who manages St. Luke's, the treatment facility up the block where we used to meet in person. And he would be happy beyond happy for us to start meeting in person and would love to host us and have us start doing that as soon as possible. I raised the question with him about the quality of the internet and whether it would support our needs. And I think somehow we need to test that. Not my area to be the tech support. Rich, do you think you would have time in the next few weeks to go over there and find out whether the internet that they have available to us is enough to support the Zooming and the live streaming?
I could try. One thing that I don't know enough about how it works if multiple people, like if I go there and find that there's enough bandwidth, but then if 20 people show up and all go on the same network, it might not be enough bandwidth.
I don't imagine that we'd all go on the bandwidth. We would have one device hooked
Okay.
up, and
Yeah, so if we
anybody
have one
who's
device-
attending remotely would be on that device.
Yeah. Well, anyone attending remotely would not be on that device. It's just the one device that they'd be on the stream. But the issue
Right,
is
we wouldn't all have our devices open, Zooming with everybody.
connected to the, yep,
Right,
yeah.
okay. So shall I send you an email with his contact info? And you can
think
set
might
up a
have-
time when he's there and you can go and,
I think you might have to think that through a little harder. I mean, I think Rich is on the right track. If we don't have our devices open, is there going to be a microphone and a camera that we step up to every time we want to speak? It's not likely.
it's a small enough room that if the device that's doing the Zooming is on the table in front of us, I think it will pick up everything. It's not a very big room.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. That's how I used to do it at CB7.
And assuming it's a small device, we also can shift it around if we need to.
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted, we could buy a live streaming camera. I don't think that's necessary. And it's not going to be production quality, but
No, it's not.
enough.
I don't think we need the production quality. I just meant so that we can be heard.
Mhm.
So that we can
Yeah.
generally be heard better than we can hear Gary right now. So you understand what I mean.
Do you mean Gary or do you mean Rich?
No, I meant Gary because when he speaks, at least on my end, it's low.
Any better now?
Audible, but you know, of all the people here, he's the one who's the lowest.
EF Hutton, though, I listened.
Okay, so
Okay.
Rich, I will set you up with that contact information and we can explore that. I haven't made any commitments about starting on a particular date. But he feels very strongly that having the residents have the experience of being part of the community, and for him, because he's been the manager of the facility, I'm going to say 30 years. You know, for him, he's very much a part of the community here. That, you know, having that happen again is important to him. And it makes sense to me. Moving along. One of the things that we have discussed is, and I'm going to subsume several agenda topics all at once here. Is that sometimes we have matters to discuss that we want to discuss in executive session, and how to manage that in terms of minutes and making minutes available publicly and having the recorded meetings available publicly and all of that. And the idea was suggested to me that we just as a habit adjourn our meetings a little bit early so that we can have an executive session to discuss any sensitive topics that need to be explored. I'll say off the record before we go public. Does anybody have any thoughts about that being a way that we proceed in general?
Well, I think that's the right way to handle all of these. In fact, there's an item on this agenda here that I think really should do as an executive session today, as we did last time. I thought the way that Celia handled it was good. I mean, she just simply said that there were items that needed to be discussed, and we did. And
Right.
but there certainly are things that we need to discuss out of view of the streaming and all the rest of that stuff.
Okay. Similarly, in terms of what we discuss publicly, what we discuss amongst the directors, what information is always available. Posting the minutes at the website was a topic from last month that we talked about. And the feedback I've had on that is that, yes, we are a public organization and we are not doing anything that can't be shared, but rather than post the minutes at the website where they are available to anybody with an internet connection, what about making the minutes available on request so that we get an email from a person and we can know who we are sharing the minutes with?
Why not just make them publicly available?
I understand the concern about not making them public. On the other hand, we still have this problem about not being able to define a member. A member, we don't know. Certainly we could make them available on request beyond the membership. But I think part of the issue here is that we don't know who the members are because we don't have a definition of
We're still working on our bylaws.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking that we restrict the minutes to members only, just that we would like to know
Sure.
who's interested in seeing them.
I don't know that we want people to have to out themselves to see our minutes. I mean, if it's a curiosity thing, I don't know if that should dictate policy, and if it's beyond that, I think the minutes, I mean, we're not subject to open meetings law, but I think it's always better for us to follow it and to lean towards transparency. And forcing people to identify themselves and ask for minutes seems overly restrictive. I think we
Right,
should.
so obviously this is a
cares enough
topic
about
that-
us who want to see our minutes.
So I can tell already that this is a topic we will need to explore further. We do not have an automatic consensus on this. So
I have a concern. I do not
ahead.
want the minutes to compete with the YouTube video of the meeting, because the YouTube video of the meeting, in my view, is a better step toward transparency than the minutes.
But the YouTube video is hours as opposed to minutes. Literally. I think they both serve an important purpose.
And we're not restricting the visibility of the video of the meeting. Correct?
Oh, no, they're public. We had this conversation about how, like, if anyone does in fact watch them, that's something we should be happy about.
Yes.
Okay, let's discuss this further at our February meeting. Um, Amy, did you want to address where we're at with the possibility of a bench in Riverside Park for Cynthia?
Okay, so we had our appeal in the newsletter, and Hetty also reached out to various organizations Cynthia had been involved with. And we got a nice boost, and we're more than halfway there. And what Hetty and I discussed was the Block Association still hasn't donated anything, so we still have that ahead of us. But Hetty and I talked about the possibility of one more newsletter appeal, and then see where we are in, say, mid-April. And possibly the Block Association can make up whatever difference there is at that point. But we got a very nice response. Very
And at the
good,
moment, our shortfall is, I think, $1,600,
right?
which seems like not a tremendous amount of shortfall. Okay, I think including it in the next newsletter and seeing if we can squeak out a few more contributions is a good way to go about that. I have heard nothing further from.
Might contact Three Parks as well.
I had.
Okay.
They distributed it. I can
Yeah, good.
send them a follow-up saying we're really close. If you'd like to send it out again, that would be great.
Mhm.
I can do that. Lost my train of thought. Oh, next newsletter. That's what it was. Amy said next newsletter we'll do the bump for, see if we can get a little bump for the bench project. Newsletter update is that the December issue did get distributed. It was a little bit late, but not terribly late. I think most buildings did receive it before the caroling, but I know that there were some that did not. Terrence reports that he has a couple of ad contracts that didn't renew for 2024, and that he intends to start seeking some replacements for them. I will be getting out the list of articles and who's going to be writing them within the next couple weeks. It should be distributed at the beginning of March, which means the deadline's going to be mid-February. So I know I need to get that out so people have time to write what they're being asked to write. Anybody else have anything they wanted to weigh in on the newsletter? All right. Peter, did you get any kind of responses from any of the security companies that you have contacted?
So I'm sorry, there were two, and I followed up with Yael, who's the person who responded before, and I've not heard back from her yet.
Okay.
So I think, she wasn't too enthusiastic on this walk that we took around in terms of coming up with something that might be attractive to us, but she did promise a follow-up that we've not gotten yet.
Okay. I think before we proceed with the conversation about hiring a consultant to advise us, it would be good if we had the feedback from her.
I agree.
Okay. Rich, meanwhile, I have looked up Danny O'Donnell's seat, and the election is in 2024. And so far, the only person whose name is in the mix is Melissa Rosenberg.
Yeah, Three Parks is having a meeting on Wednesday and there are 4 candidates. Melissa and 3 others who are speaking as at least potential candidates. Eli Northrop, Mika Lasher, and Barry Weinberg.
Okay, and the primary is on June 25th. And I think all of this information should be in the next newsletter. Rich, do you expect to attend that meeting?
I'm potentially going.
Okay.
If I'm able to, I'm hoping to go.
If you do, and if there are any announcements other than those 4 names, would you please get the additional information to me?
I wouldn't think anyone else that would show up and announce, but not have already announced. I think at least some of them weren't planning on announcing yet, but did put themselves on the list for Wednesday just so that they can be at the meeting on Wednesday.
It is I know we didn't really, it is kind of a big deal that Danny O'Donnell is stepping down, and that there are 4 people who a lot of people don't know very much about are running. So if we could, and when did you say when is the election, Rich?
Hetty said it's
Primary is June 25th.
Yeah, and when's the next newsletter? I mean, it might be good to have something about the 4 candidates. Or
I agree, and we have a newsletter coming out in March and another one in June that will be out before the election, the primary.
Okay.
So we will have an opportunity to make sure that people know they have to pay attention to this. And at least give them.
Would we want to ask them a few questions, and if they give responses, print them in the newsletter?
I have no objection to that, either as newsletter editor or acting chair. We would need someone to formulate the question or questions and attempt to get the answers. If anybody would like to spearhead that.
But I'll take that on.
All right, it's all yours, Rich.
A question here, though, is we need to figure out a process for agreeing on questions. Unless I'm just delegated to come up with questions.
Why don't you come up with, 2 or 3 questions, circulate them to us, the board. And if anybody has anything to say about those questions, we'll make sure to get them to you before your meeting. Or you don't have to ask the questions at the meeting.
I would just be emailing each of them.
You would just be emailing. Okay, so give us a deadline for when you want answers by, so you can email and get the information to me in time for a mid-February newsletter deadline. I think I don't think it has to be, groundbreaking rocket science kind of questions. I think something that gives us a feel for what's important to each of these people will help us.
Do we know how to even find out if anyone's running in the Republican primary?
The website I was just at seemed to have lists of that kind of stuff. It was Ballotpedia.
Okay. I'm just wondering if people haven't declared yet, who right, we could talk offline and figure it out.
Yeah, take a look at Ballotpedia.
Yeah.
And then
yeah, I'll try to figure out.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you this link.
Yeah, I'm there now.
Okay, when you click on are you at the Assembly Elections 2024?
No, and I'm getting I'll find it. We should move on.
Yeah. One moment, just dropping it into an email so I don't forget. Okay, liability insurance was a topic we touched on last time. I have written to the board president of the Masters, who didn't give me any information because she said she didn't know anything, and rather than shoot me over to their managing agent, she suggested that using AI would be a good way to answer the question. I've written to Dorothy O'Hanlon, who lives in the Broadmoor, to see if she could connect us with the board president, who could give us the okay to find out how much coverage, they maintain for their board. I've gotten the information from my board. My board maintains a $2 million policy with a deductible of $2,500, and it costs $4,353 per year in premium. So just as a beginning of our process of figuring this out, that's a place to start. Has anybody else been able to get any information about this?
I have an email into our board president. I know they have it. I just don't know how much they pay and what the deductible is, or, you know, how much it's worth. So if I ever hear back from her, I will let you know.
Okay. So we will continue that discussion. Celia sent me a very informative email with a bunch of good ideas that we can pursue, that I will pursue. You know, we do have, ultimately we'll have to answer the basic question of, is this something that we as a group need to maintain? Is there any way in which we're covered other than maintaining a policy that we pay for ourselves? How do other organizations like ours manage this? So we do have a bunch of questions that we need to explore further. But I think it's an important topic for us to explore further, so we are not in the dark and we can make our decisions with better information than we've had in the past. Any other input about the liability insurance topic? All right, moving on. I seem to have put the bylaws in both old business and new business, so I'm just going to get it out of the way in the old business. I distributed a revised version. Has anybody taken time to look at it?
I have looked at it and I've taken some notes, but this is just an idea. What if we set up a meeting between monthly meetings to just talk about this? Because maybe it's just me, but I'm already tired. And the idea of trying to plunge into this now doesn't really appeal to me. And it seems like every monthly meeting, we just have so much else to deal with.
We're working on a lot of stuff all at once,
Right.
and I agree.
And I do feel that if we could probably do it in one meeting, probably in an hour, or maybe, you know, and just hash out the final things and, you know, have a document we're ready to move ahead on.
I think it's a good idea. I think it's gonna need some face-to-face interaction. It's much faster than trying to do it this way. And I'd be happy to join you when I marked up the copy. And first of all, I think it's actually a really good cut on this that you sent out. And
Thank you.
but there are some things that I marked up, and I'm sure everybody else has them, and we should just sit around a table and try to hash them out.
Tuesday, January 30th, 3 weeks from tonight.
I think that's okay with me. Let me check.
Amy?
I'm coming back from California that night at like midnight, so I can't do it. I could do it the next night, but can't do Tuesday.
So that would be Wednesday, the 31st.
One sec.
Gary's looking. Anybody else who would like to?
I'm okay
Make
on that day, Wednesday, the 31st.
Herb, interested? You're muted.
I was saying yes to the 31st.
I have a work thing until 7. I could do it after like 7:30.
Okay. Celia?
Yes.
All right. Anybody else I haven't checked? Peter?
I think so. Yes, I'll have to get back to you, but I think so. Yes, provisionally, yes.
Okay, so I am putting in my calendar bylaws meeting Wednesday, the 31st at 7:30 p.m.
Should we do it at the at St. Luke's?
I can check with Ray, and maybe that would be an opportunity to fiddle around with the internet.
Yeah.
And if for whatever reason we're not doing it Ray's, I have a big dining room table, and I don't mind if we convene there. Okay, let's keep going. Peter, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so the next two items have your name next to them. You had brought up the idea of hiring an administrative assistant.
Right.
What do you
It's
want to
as
tell us
simple as
about that?
Well, the idea is that there are just a lot of things that come up at meetings, which turn out to be a lot of work on just volunteers, and whether it's website updates or documenting procedures for SAPO permits and things like that, it would just be good to have an admin to manage that, because or if it's getting out thank you letters that the board board decides we want to do, or identifying who's in charge of the district sanitation, who's the district leader for sanitation, those kinds of things that we may not have to take time up at board meetings, that an admin could help us organize. And it just seems that we've all struggled with a lot of things that we depend entirely on volunteers for. And while that's great, it's not always possible. So it would just be helpful, as well as being a good job for someone in the community who was interested in this kind of thing. So it was just a thought to help us be more, we've talked, for example, on the bylaws about researching a lot of other block association bylaws and assembling that, and what work has been done on that, putting them all together and being able to present that to the board, so that collectively we might be able to, see it organized and have an easier time of finding, what are the best practices, what are the questions that we have, and then just go back to those organizations and see. It's awfully difficult to move the P up the hill if it's all on directors and a few wonderful volunteers who step up. We don't always have them, and it would just be good to have someone who we could turn to who's had that as a job. Pretty
Thoughts,
simple.
comments, questions, anybody?
Let me add something to this. It may seem like it's a little bit off topic, but as I went through the bylaws, one of the things that occurred to me is that we don't have a budget. You know, we don't, I've never been in an organization that didn't have a budget. You know, at least an organization that was managed, and you know, when a thing like this comes up, as Peter has suggested, and I think there's a lot of merit in what he's suggesting. You know, how much do we want to spend on that? And how is that? You know, how does that fit with all of the other things that we want to spend resources on over the next year? We've been running on a kind of ad hoc basis where every item comes up, we sort of debate it, and if we think it's right, we then say, okay, let's spend some money on that, et cetera, on it. I think we should be doing this stuff in view of some larger question, which is how do we want to? We have 40,000 or so in resources now that are sitting there. How do we want to use those resources best? What new activities do we want to initiate, et cetera? And it occurred to me when I was going through the bylaws, some organizations actually put in their bylaws that at the annual meeting, a budget will be presented and a financial report for the past year. I mean, that's the way our co-op works. Probably your co-ops work that way, et cetera. And I would think that we shouldn't sort of take a decision on what Peter's proposing unless we really have some bigger sense of how we're going to spend our resources, how much money we need to raise each year in order to cover those resources. I mean, this, as you probably saw in the financial report, we have a net positive, significant net positive amount because we stopped doing the guard. And yet we've also gone down significantly in the amount of resources coming in this past
Right.
year.
Let me jump in and interrupt you a little bit, Gary, and then you can have the floor back. Your arrival in the neighborhood, in the block association, happened to coincide with the first time in, you know, the 50 years of the block association's life that just about the entirety of the budget was no longer being spent on a guard. If I don't know that we ever had an annual budget, but if we did, you would see that, you know, here's the income and almost exactly the same amount was going to be spent on the guard. This is the first time ever that there is that money because we haven't had the guard. I agree with you that we're not going to make a decision about hiring an administrative assistant without having the rest of the pieces of the big picture a little better defined, including whether we're hiring a guard or some other security measure. We do present the financial report every year at the annual meeting and we publish it in the newsletter. So that's always been in place.
And I'm not opposed to tabling this whole thing if for a budget. There's also, I mean, now it's the newsletter, but it was always the security guard service and the newsletter was 100% of the pretty much of the income and the expenses for as long as I can remember.
And one of the reasons the net has dropped this year is because since we were not paying for a guard, we made a decision not to be as aggressive as we might ordinarily have been about contributions, both from individuals, and we didn't send out the annual letter to the buildings. Because if we don't know what we're spending the money on, thank you, Sharia. If we don't know what we're spending the money on, it seems a little greedy to just be trying to bring it in. I think when we have a better idea of where we are and what we're doing financially, then yes, we would go back to asking buildings for more money. And the spring fundraiser, resuming that is going to help. We usually raise several $1,000s from that, which helps the bottom line as well. And we haven't done that since before COVID.
No, I'm not, you know, I'm aware of all of these kinds of things, but now we have to decide what we actually want to do if we don't spend all of our money hard. And so we have to join those two things.
Agree. And the liability insurance is a factor there as well.
Exactly.
All right, Peter,
Yes.
open streets, what's going on?
Well, we're just putting together the 2024 calendar, which hopefully we will have in the next 60 days or so. The winter plantings went in on December the 21st. There are
Just in time
24
for caroling.
Just in time for caroling, right? They were installed just for caroling. And there were 24 additional planters that were added. So I think the total is now 38 across the two blocks. DOT did that through their contract with the Horticultural Society of New York. We are in the process of, Bella Gallo, who was our communication and events manager, is off to a year and a half in Amsterdam. So is, and also had an illness. So we have we need to replace her, and we're looking to do that in the next, also in the next 90 days or so. So there are, the website is a little long in the tooth now. There are some updates that are needed that have not been done because of Bella's winding down. So hopefully we'll get that together in the next 90 days or so, and we'll have we'll have events on the street, more or less like we did last year. A lot of them will be on the Amsterdam block, which is open. As I'm sure everyone's aware, the Toll Brothers completed their construction. They opened up. All their bollards are removed. So that block is pretty much complete.
Herb, I see your hand up.
I want to let Peter finish, but I'm curious if there's anyone who, I want to ask this in the fairest way. I wonder what people think about the changes that have been made to the street. Do they think that the traffic is slowed, that it's beautiful, that it's ugly, that Anne seems to want to talk about it?
Yeah,
I wanted you to complete your thought, Peter. Go ahead, Anne.
I want to ask the question in the most open way. I think everyone knows what my view is, and I just want to ask it as what do people think?
Sure. You wanted me to, Anne, you want to go ahead and ask your question first? Well,
my husband and I were enthusiastic about the plan to begin with. And, we saw the paintings being done and that sort of thing. And then suddenly these boulders came. And the street looks nothing like the poster now. And the boulders are really being used from what I could see. And I live on at 250 West 103rd. So I live between Broadway and West End. And what I see is that people are out smoking and sitting on the boulders smoking. And I see people eating. I see them dropping trash there. The street cleaners aren't able to get in there to clean. And I don't see it being cleaned. And we're very concerned about it. And again, that poster looks beautiful, but it's not at all like the street looks now. And we are aware of more noise, more people beeping horns because they can't get through. There was a snowplow trying to get through on Saturday night, I think, or before the one of the possible snows didn't occur, of course, but they were putting down sand, and he was bleeping and beeping and beeping, It went on for quite a while. There was a man trying to park the dumpster in front of the Marseille. And he was furious because he said, how am I supposed to get in here? Well, he did get in, but he's now pushed up against one of the boulders. I assumed that the boulders were going to be removed once people got used to the idea of having the street as an open street. Is that not true?
Well, no, the boulders, the DOT calls them safety stones, were have been they were added to the plan by DOT, and they have put them on other open streets as well. Not in every case. They didn't do it on the Amsterdam block. By the Marseille, it was specifically because that is an area where they call it actually a street seat, and they wanted to make sure it was safe from traffic. I personally agree with you that there are, design considerations that DOT should look at. For example, a flexible bollard which prevents a street sweeper from going up and down the curb, the one all the way closest to the curb. I'm not sure why they include that in the design. And we have mentioned that to DOT. So I think the pedestrian unit is looking at this. There are two other things that you mentioned that I just want to respond to very quickly. The dumpster was supposed to be put to the east of the Hug on the Marseille, which is still in front of their building. So I'm not sure why they put it there. And I noticed the same thing that you noticed the other day. Building supers actually started at the master apartment, and it's, again, this is not city policy or anything that has to do with anything that I might influence. This is just a personal opinion that building supers are starting to, rather than to store plastic trash bags on the sidewalk, they're putting them out on the street. They started doing this at the master.
The master's building has no Hug.
That's right. They just put them out on the street.
I don't know.
Yeah. They've been doing that
on the Broadway West End block. The super is definitely using the Hug for trash. Yes,
exactly. And frankly, would you rather have them on the sidewalk or in the Hugs? And the sanitation department does pick them up. There's no problem in terms of clearance, even with the next generation fire trucks in terms of the width of getting through. But sanitation does pick them up, and then most of the supers generally do clean up those spaces. So the question is, would you rather have trash bags on the sidewalk or in the street? It's, again, this isn't an open street, which they're now calling a shared street, by the way, a new name we need to get used to. But it is a question. Would you rather have trash bags stored on the sidewalk or out in the street? It's just kind of like, fire hydrants are the de facto, standing zones for New Yorkers. And it's really not a problem as long as there's a driver in their car so that if there's an emergency, they can move. So some of these things are invented by flexible New Yorkers, and supers are putting the bags for pickups out in the Hugs. That's nothing that we did. Pardon me?
Those do get picked up. I'm talking about, people eating food, sitting on the boulders, eating food and just dropping trash there.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't concerned about whether or not they would be picked up, because they are being picked up by the trash people.
Right.
I
they're
see
being
some
picked
other
up
hands
and-
up and I want
Yeah,
to
right.
broaden the discussion. Nancy,
Okay.
go ahead, unmute.
Yes, so Peter, you mentioned the pedestrian unit. Could you explain to me what that is?
Yeah,
Is it-
that's the unit. That is the unit that participated at the Peace Institute. It's a unit within DOT that manages the street improvement plans, and other pedestrian improvements. The head of it is Emily Weidenhoff, who participated at the meeting in June.
My other question is in terms of what Anne is raising, is there a possibility of getting those boulders removed?
Yes, I think there is.
And how might you, I assume it would fall to you, aren't you sort of the Open Streets local person dealing with DOT? I mean, is there a way you could approach them about that?
I think I think there are going to be surveys of the street that DOT is going to launch, and they are going to be asking people whether they like them or they don't like them. In some cases, it is a safety matter. I don't think it is in the hugs, but in other locations where there are people who are walking or standing, they want to protect them from moving vehicles. That's, the planters also do serve that.
When you're saying other locations, do you mean other locations on 103rd Street, or do you mean?
Yes, right. Yeah, they're in front of the hostel. They're on the Amsterdam block. In some locations, they call that street furniture, and they are safety stones. They're not cement blocks. They were actually they're granite blocks, and they're used all over the city. I'm sure you've noticed them if you go to Union Square or University.
So how will the survey, Department of Transportation, be distributed? Do you know what their plan is and when?
They have said springtime. They want to give it some time. I don't know how they plan to distribute it, but I'm sure we will share that information. And obviously we will want as much participation as possible. And if there are design elements of the shared street that are really not like, that people will have the opportunity to say so, and hopefully they will consider our changes.
Yeah, so it would be really helpful to have as much information about that in advance. So
I agree. There also is the street plan survey, and people should. There is a QR code. Most of those signs have been removed, and you can put in a comment that you really don't like the granite blocks, and that you feel that people are abusing them. I don't have a problem. There are benches on city streets, and there are benches of people sitting there, people eating sandwiches and throwing trash and making a mess is something that all of us detest, that kind of behavior.
The street sweepers can't get in there, and as Anne is pointing out, that garbage is not necessarily picked up by the supers at the building. I'm very aware of, I know the building that Gary lives in, I think the super cleans that hug regularly, but I don't know.
And they do across the street, and the one next to, I don't know the building address, but the super there sprays that down, and the Marseille does as well. I don't, actually, you could tell me about the one by the Alexandria if they do that as well. It's, the building is responsible for, without any of this, I think it's 18 inches from the curb space. And now the hugs are obviously more than that.
Let me jump in.
Can I ask one more question?
Hang on one second, Anne, I'll get to you
Sure.
in just a sec. In answer to Herb's question about the response to the project, there's been a little bit of traffic through the website. People who have registered as members of the Block Association. One came from a resident of 865 West End who said, "Why is 103rd Street between West End and Broadway so dirty? The street is filled with trash. Can the sweeper not get through because of the big stones on the street? It's awful and lots of rats." So that was one. There's another one from a resident of 210 West 103rd Street that says, "Co-op owner against the new open streets. The open spaces on my block between Broadway and Amsterdam collect garbage and are not maintained. Delivery trucks back up over the posts and bend them. The spaces are not able to be cleaned by the street cleaner, and the street cleaner just drives down the street. They do not weave in and out of the spaces, leaving the curbs filthy. Rats again are infesting the street. The spaces are only used by delivery people that leave their bikes. Cars do not slow down. It would be better to install a speed bump. The trash and dead plants in the big, ugly cement flower pots. I think that was before the replanting was done, Peter. We've also lost parking. What do I do to make these spaces go away?" So I've written back to each of those people asking if I can share their information with Peter as the Open Streets poobah, and have not received answers from either of them. Anne, you had a question, then Gary and Amy, you'll be coming up right after. And we do need to wrap it up because we need to save a few minutes for executive session. Anne, go.
My question is just, is the open street going to be extended between West End and Riverside?
Yeah, again, I don't have any indication that it will at this point.
So it won't be park to park.
It won't be,
It's not.
no, I mean, it wasn't park to park before. It's still what we want. With Douglas at its heart. Douglas is not, unfortunately, because it's an authority, it's NYCHA, it's not part of even DOT, but there is a lot of interest from within NYCHA to do this among different organizations. So we would like it very much to be park to park. Whether or not that's going to happen, I can't tell you. They did, there is, and there was a big meeting yesterday on reimagining the curb, that the area that the Columbus Avenue bid, not our bid here, which is the Columbus Amsterdam bid, even though so the Columbus bid is between 65th Street and 84th Street, and the city is discussing with them doing a whole range of changes, many of which include elements that they used on the shared street. The intersection improvements to shorten crossing distances and improve visibility are especially significant, and I think the least controversial parts of the project as well, because they are proven to reduce injury and crashes, especially to walkers and the wheelchair users. So I know, the hugs are clearly the most controversial parts of the design, and that's probably not just true on 103rd Street. So we'll see.
Moving us along, Amy, you've had your hand up for a while. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I guess not to beat a dead horse, but I envisioned something different for the hugs, and when I saw those big things, stones, rocks, whatever, I thought, oh, this is a temporary thing just to keep cars from parking in there, because cars kept parking in there. And then I was elsewhere in the city and I saw them elsewhere, and I thought, oh no, this is what they really wanted there. And I just feel like it was a lost opportunity, because you had some goodwill And not, I don't mean you, Peter, I mean, the city had some goodwill about this project. And they did something that it's just aesthetically really not pleasing and problematic for people. So I guess one of my questions is, could that be replaced by a bench? I mean, I thought originally the idea was to have little tables or benches. If it was replaced by a bench, at least aesthetically, it would look nicer. You would still have people sitting there and eating their food and possibly throwing the garbage out. And you still have people sitting there and smoking, but it would at least look like something elegant rather than just this big rock that's plopped in the street. So, I don't know if you can answer that or that's something for DOT, but it just a comment.
You're right. I can't answer that, only to say that benches are possibly even more controversial than the safety stones.
All right, Gary, you had your hand up.
I was just going to say that the last summer when we were arguing about this, I went and looked at a bunch of other streets that were done with hugs around the city. And two things are different from there to here. One is that they do use benches and other things in those other streets. And I was told that, in fact, many of the building owners did not want benches there because they did not want homeless people sitting on them. And so that was ruled out for that reason. The second difference is that the size of the boulders that they used, or the granite pieces they used, was much smaller than those residential areas. And it really wasn't as offensive as these huge objects that they put in that area. My personal view is that they could have accomplished almost everything that they were doing by having only one granite thing out on the outer edge of it, because that's what in fact stops people from using it as a parking space or other things, and by adding one or two more planters in each one of them, which I think the planters have been a great success. I love the planters along the street on it. So it may be that we can argue that some fine tuning of what they've done is what's necessary, and to get some of the big ones out of there, and so they don't dominate the sense of the space.
Herb, your hand is up.
Yes.
And please, let's wrap up so that we
I have
can
a
talk about what we
question.
need to talk about.
This is short question and a comment. Peter, I thought you'd said at some point that the hugs would be cleaned by the people who were doing the horticulture.
Yeah, it is part of their maintenance agreement. And if you're saying, why isn't that happening? I've asked that same question.
Okay.
They seem to be much better at planting than they do at cleaning hugs.
Well, my question.
I think they have been out there once that I've seen, but it's not a regular cleaning.
Okay, I was surprised that was. And the comment that I wanted to make no one seems to be focused on quite this. I think
every one of us should be.
They're terribly ugly.
Hang on, Gary.
The hugs, the way they're painted, are terribly ugly. I think that counts for something. And some of that is the colors and the way it was painted, but some of it is because they painted over this rough surface, which is now filling in with dirt.
Yeah.
Every little hole in the pavement, you have yellow paint with dirt, blue paint with dirt. I don't think that was the plan. That's the way
I do not understand why they would invest all this money and not have repaved the street before. And the milling and repaving is also on a separate cycle. For all I know, again, this is not my department. The DOT milling and repaving department is like its own universe. Okay. So this whole, all the art could be milled and replaced with just tan gravel epoxy. And we would not even be notified more than, 20 days before that took place. That could happen, Herb. And there's nothing any of us could do to influence that. If you've noticed how arbitrary repaving, the milling and repaving of streets is. It's a mystery how that comes about. And there are many other examples of a lot of work being done on the streets, and then they just get remilled. And if they had just timed it in such a way that some of the other changes hadn't been made, they could have saved a lot of money. But that's just not how it works. So I agree. It's very wasteful the way it's currently done. And it's been that way apparently for 40 years.
Let's continue because it's 9:45. Thank you, Peter, for answering all of those questions. And
You're
your
welcome.
questions have been answered.
I hope we can make it better. And in the meantime, we'll all do our best to, keep it as clean as possible. We have done some cleaning ourselves, not a tremendous amount, but I'm unhappy with that as well. And for most of the supers have been really terrific in my observation about spraying them down and keeping their areas clean too, because we all want the street cleaner. That's something we all agree on. Uncontroversial and rat-free too.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. I'm going to ask everyone who's not a board member to excuse themselves. Thank you for coming. I hope we've been able to address your concerns.
Thank
Y'all
you.
come back now. All right. So I guess I didn't formally adjourn
Wait,
our meeting. Was I supposed to?
We should stop the recording in the live stream.